don't know about you, but I love to have fun in the classroom. I love to laugh. I love to get my students laughing, whether they're laughing at me or with me. Laughter is great. And it was so exciting to me when I learned that there was scientific evidence that laughter really has all sorts of great health benefits and emotional benefits. So now I feel validated in all of the craziness that takes place in this classroom. It has a therapeutic purpose, right? All joking aside, it really does have great benefits. And not only laughter and having fun, but play has really important benefits. So I'm talking today about a kind of play. I'm talking about sensorimotor activities as a means of teaching the children modulation. So as I've mentioned before, students who have experienced a lot of trauma in their lives spend a lot of time reliving the trauma, or even if they're not actively reliving it, their bodies are involuntarily responding to that past trauma, or their bodies are responding to the triggering effects of, or the triggered effects of memories of the trauma. So we are not going to find them accessible or ready to learn when they come into our classrooms if they're all worked up emotionally. And we need to remember, it's important to remember that usually that over aroused state or under aroused state is involuntary. They're not choosing to feel that way. Their bodies are just responding that way because of the severity of their trauma, because it is a serious issue that we can't fail to address. Okay, so one way we can do this is, as I said, to teach them modulation, and it's fun, and it's really quick, or you could take longer if you like. Okay, so I wrote in the blog about how I like to have my students use the glockenspiel instruments. I applied for a grant and got a grant to purchase a set of 10 really nice glockenspiel instruments. And some kids are musical and they've got music memorized. Some kids like to look at the sheet music that I've given them, and I color code and make it really easy for them. And some kids just like to make stuff up. But anyway, you can teach modulation really simply with instruments like that. And if you don't have these beautiful instruments, you can get rhythm instruments. You can put a Facebook post out there and ask for families who have children who have outgrown their little xylophones. You could use those. Anything that makes noise. And so what you do is the instruments that you're using, you just start out having them, maybe play them softly, and then build to a very loud volume, and then bring it back down to a very soft. You can vary, you get the idea. All right. And another way that I love to do this is with a balloon volley. And you can do this with one student. They can do it solo on their own, or they can interact with a partner and use the same balloon, or they can add 2 balloons. You can vary it. They can be required to use their elbow instead of their hands, or their nose, or their knee, or something like that. But when I did it with the balloons, I liked to start out with kind of a medium tempo or mood song, and then get it really lively, and then bring it back down to something easier. So I'm going to show you that in the video. You'll see the modulation that takes place. Now, it's important. It's not just play. It is play with a purpose, and it has a real benefits.
I'll follow the balloon, not the
as you could see in that video, the students, I mean, there was no risk, no pressure. It was just all about having fun. And at that point, I didn't really tell them that we were modulating. But the other important piece of this is after you've done this, and what you need to do is do this on a regular basis. You can't just, teach this one day and maybe do it 2 or 3 more times. You're really going to need to have these kids practice this. And you need to let them know after you've done a few of these that there's a reason, and that you are teaching them to modulate. You're teaching them to learn how to gain some control over their body's responses to their emotions. And that's the really powerful thing, is when they realize that they can gain some control over this. And you're just teaching it in such a light-hearted, risk-free, accessible way through play. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It doesn't require a lot of effort. It is just fun. And I know some of my class periods are only 50 minutes long, and it seems like 2 or 3 minutes can turn into 5, and even if it does turn into 5 minutes, those 5 minutes are an investment, because without that activity you might not be able to reach either a segment of your classroom population, or perhaps almost your entire classroom population, depending on your classroom setting and depending on what's going on in the students' lives at that moment. So it's worth it. Anything you can do to help your students overcome this trauma and gain a little bit more control over themselves and their lives, it's going to be worth that time that you've invested in preparation and engaging in the activity.